welcome to A Different Shade of Black. If you don't know who I am, I'm Dudun Tlabati, and this is a platform where we redefine the image of an African person and we share the other side, the unexpected and unexplored stories about black people. So today's topic is very exciting, and I think it's so relevant to the times that we are living in, and it's about leadership in the African context. So before I introduce my guest, I'd like to give you a little story. So he was one of my first bosses when I started, as a very loudmouth, very opinionated, very Julius Malema type of like person in the bank. And he's helped guide my career, and he's done such amazing work. I mean, you can look him up. His name is Lincoln Mali, and he is, to me, the kind of guy that you want to talk to when you want to explore leadership, when you want an actual physical example of what a great leader is. Welcome, Lincoln. Thank you very much for doing the show with me. So, for those who don't know you, Lincoln, tell me a bit about yourself.
Well, my kids think I'm a loudmouth. My wife thinks I work too hard. But generally, I'm just somebody who has always been fascinated by leadership, by the responsibility that comes with leading others towards a bigger purpose. And I've been at Standard Bank now for the last 15 years. And I've spent a lot of that time managing and leading thousands of people in different teams in different countries. And I've grown from that experience, and each interaction kind of teaches you more things about people, and it's an ongoing journey of learning.
There's an argument that people have in terms of that, you know, we as Africans can organize ourselves better as a collective in order to get and to almost like put to bed the stereotypes that Africans can't lead. So you've traveled Africa extensively, and in your travels you've actually seen leadership and great leaders and probably poor leaders in different organizations throughout Africa. Do you think that we are too different to approach leadership in one way, or is there an opportunity for us to actually leverage off each other and organize ourselves and come up with one effective leadership model?
I think that if I think back, you can identify three different phases of African leadership. The first phase were the doyens of African leadership, the Nkrumahs, the Kawundas, the Machells, the Mandelas, and so on, who really founded the concepts of African leadership as in their fight against colonialism. And they were quite revered and quite admired. And sometimes we even airbrush some of their mistakes because of the goodness that came from them. Then you have the last 20, 25 years of actually bad leadership in all spheres. The plunder of resources, corruption, bribery, manipulation, and lack of development. But what I see today are amazing young leaders in all spheres who are starting to chart a new path that defines Africa very differently, that seek to get influences from different parts of the world, and then try and give them an African perspective and an African grounding. So whilst I'm not sure whether there's some greatness in just finding one African leadership model, I think that the influences that are positive are being embraced. From the Western style of leadership, the Eastern style of leadership, embrace it with what is inherently African. My view is that that is starting to emerge. The young leaders that I see today, I think are going to show the world flames when it comes to leading in a very different way.
I have to say I agree with you. Do you think that there's a platform, enough of a platform to tell those stories? Because the reason why I say that is that if you're looking for those great leaders, you find them, right? But if you're looking on social media, you don't find a lot of those stories. Is it an element of, you know, in time these stories would reach the great masses? Or do we have so much on the focus? And I mean, I personally believe what's happening in the country is due to happen. And if you look at the natural progression of our democracy, at some point this was going to happen. But the focus is on the crisis that we find ourselves in, on whether there's a debate whether certain individuals are good leaders or bad leaders, that the really great leadership stories are not getting enough of a platform? Is it our focus, that our focus is completely wrong, or is it because in time do you think those stories will actually reach mainstream media?
I have a saying, I always argue that our true leaders are hidden in plain sight.
Okay.
We don't see them because sometimes the lens through which we try and see them are the wrong lenses.
Yes.
We're trying to see them in the charismatic way of the mainstream media. We're trying to see them as these glorified people who've done these amazing things for themselves. But in the African context, there are thousands of people who are leading, doing amazing things against the most horrible, horrible odds.
Yes.
That for me is leadership.
Yes.
And I think many people are not separating the difference or not defining the difference between somebody who's in a leadership role
Yes.
and somebody who's leading.
Okay.
We have many people who are in leadership roles.
And the
They're
stories
not
are
leading.
So
We tell a lot of their stories, but they're not leading.
yeah,
But there are many people who are leaders.
and that's actually a
They
very
may
good
not
point,
be in a leadership position.
We're telling a lot of the story. It's almost like this book that's The Quiet that says that most of the time it's the extrovert that
Absolutely.
get the attention, and it's
Yes.
the extrovertedness, not necessarily the leadership,
Aha.
that is getting the attention.
Because leadership is a choice.
Okay.
It's a decision to do good, to do well, to lead people towards something.
Yes.
And sometimes that leadership can come from any angle,
Yeah.
from any environment, from any person. When I look at some of the places where people are thriving on the continent,
Yes.
including South Africa,
Yeah.
they are doing that in spite of the people who are meant to be leaders,
Yes.
in spite of the governments that are meant to be creating environments. But people will do well.
Because it's a choice to solve problems.
It's a choice to solve problems.
Okay.
They will go and start businesses
Yes.
when there's not enough support, and they will do those businesses.
Yeah.
They'll start schools to help young people. They will go out there and help the girls' heart
Yeah.
without much fanfare. They are hidden from the lights.
Yes.
They are hidden from the stage because they don't do it for the stage.
And do you think that, I always argue that in South Africa, one of the things that has been sold so wrong, and maybe somebody might argue not in South Africa but in the world, is entrepreneurship. It's like blurred with what is it, tenderpreneurship, but it's these great, fantastic stories, and everybody thinks that when they go into it, they need to start big in order to show the world that they're actually creating value through entrepreneurship. Is it the same with leadership in your opinion, from the statement that you've said, that, you know what, we've defined leadership in such a narrow way that if you are not doing what is deemed as political consciousness or some kind of consciousness, then you are not leading.
Yes.
I think it's
In fact,
fair to say that.
most entrepreneurs and most leaders have no drama. None. They actually
That
have no drama.
It's such a powerful
They
statement.
lead or they do their business because it is about the business. It's not about themselves.
Okay.
It's about the larger cause. It's about the thing that they do. The others, it's about them.
Yes.
It's a see me, I've won this tender.
Yeah.
Or see me, I've been elected to this position.
Yes.
I go back to this thing that says, if you're in a leadership position, the day you are appointed, when you are elected, or even when you assume a leadership position from a hereditary point of view, when you start your illegitimate, it's through time
That you prove
and what you do and what you say
Yes.
that the people can say, actually, that person is a leader.
Yeah.
It's not us defining ourselves as leaders, it's others who, because of their benefit from what good we do, that say, indeed, these are leaders. Similarly with entrepreneurs, they start with a crazy idea to provide a product or a service and fight against odds to make it succeed. If I take the entrepreneurship, it's taken something that's noble. Providing a service to government is a noble thing.
Yes.
Opening up that service to a broader group of people so that it's not only white firms, it's a noble thing. Where it gets corrupted is if I have inside people
Yes.
regardless of my skill, regardless of my experience, I
follow
now
the
find a
process.
way that I'm getting all these tenders
Yes.
and suddenly pay back to politicians and things.
Yeah.
Don't call yourself an entrepreneur because you're not.
Yeah.
Even if you were asleep for years, you still get a tender.
Yes.
And even if you don't deliver the service, you still get the tender.
Tender, yes.
So please, don't
Yeah.
call yourself a business person because you're not.
Yeah.
You just have the drama because you've got connections.
Okay.
But the true entrepreneurs will provide those services at the right price to government, with the right quality to government, so that it benefits the end user, so that government can also be seen to deliver.
You know, with your point on self-promotion, and this thing that I always debate with myself is that first thing I think as South Africans, especially as Black South Africans, because of our, and I would say that we're not well traveled because of our history, the resources that we have, and the economic factors that are against us, we don't know how westernized we are. We don't even know our expectations of our leaders comes from a very Western perspective. It's actually when you leave and you really immerse yourself into other cultures in Africa and you realize how westernized we are. So when it comes to self-promotion, if you look at the Western model, if you look at the American election model, if you look at how they do things, it's very much about how do you, the leader that self-promotes themselves is seen as the most effective leader. You know, you have presidents on Twitter, you have presidents tweeting, which I don't know why he's tweeting, but you have presidents tweeting. And it's all about self-promotion. So do you think that the Western model is an effective model? Because I feel like, you know, you can't really implement something that you're not immersed in the culture of that, right? Maybe that's why when we've tried to implement a Western model leadership approach, but because it's not part of who we are as Africans, it's not part of our culture, we probably fail at it. Or is the Western model just not made for Africa? Or people might even argue for the world is not working anymore.
Yeah, I think it varies. There are some positive elements in that Western culture.
Yes.
One of which is the confidence factor that it gives, the front foot approach to things.
Yes.
But you gotta know where the boundary is. I think what most people don't understand is where the boundary is, where you go overboard and become conceited, where it becomes about ego, where it becomes about you only. I think also on the continent, it's important to understand that we're not a homogeneous group of people. In fact, in each country, sometimes there's so much divergence because there's an influence of culture, influence of religion, influence of the structures and systems we have in each country, and they have an influence. So if in Nigeria, you are in the northern part of Nigeria, the Fulani Hausa culture has a big influence. If you are maybe in the south and you're dealing with the Yoruba culture, there is a different way of looking at things. And then similarly in other countries, the same things would obtain. My sense is that there are certain things that are inherent in the African culture, and maybe even in the Eastern culture. The humility is important. The sense of belonging to a broader group and working for something bigger is important. The sense of selflessness is important. Helping others is important. And caring for someone with less is important. So those things I think do embody some important values which one can use. So Ubuntu in our environment would be that. So I would say that you can still have somebody who has all of those, but they're confident.
So it's like a blend of the two.
It's a wonderful blend. As long as it's country specific and context specific, it can work for you. I found that for myself, I've had to vary my styles of leadership in the different countries where I operate, or sometimes in the different regions where I operate. So, for an example, I don't do hierarchy very well. I don't like hierarchy. But there are certain parts and certain countries where hierarchy is such an important thing.
Especially the Western countries.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But even on the continent,
Yes.
you have places where age and position and gender and status are very important. So instead of fighting those things, I've had to find different ways of approaching it. Rather than fighting in established culture, it's to find a way of modifying it and coming across in a particular way to help those things.
So let me throw a spanner in the works.
Okay.
You know, because we have such an interrupted history because of colonization and apartheid. Most of the time when people want to go back to the core African leadership model or our ways, it's always with reference to that time pre-colonization. But I believe in evolution. Like I always tell people that, you know, polygamy back then and polygamy back now, if we didn't have an interrupted history, we would practice it differently. So when you want to practice it like 100 years ago, sometimes it doesn't work in the context of our time. And it's the same when it comes to this cooperative leadership, when it comes to the khutla. Some people might argue that our kumbaya moments in the way in which we want to lead doesn't necessarily work in the new modern economy. What's your views on that?
I'm reminded of a story told by two African leaders, and they talk about a Lozi chief. This Lozi chief is called from his village, and they say, come to the place where the king is. The king had passed away, and they said, why? And he says, why did you come? Why did you ask me to come here? They said, we've decided that you shall be king. And instead of jumping up, beating his chest and be happy, he felt so small. And he said, you've just killed me. And they said, what do you mean? He said, in order for the nation to rise, I must die. Which is the sense of, in order for the nation to thrive, the leader must kill himself and his focus on self and live for a greater community.
So he hasn't actualized
Absolutely. It. So when you look at that way of leading in the past, those values are still relevant because the chief was a leader of equals. He still was the chief, but he ruled within a council. That kind of decision making is still relevant today. Inclusive leadership is still relevant today. Two, the sense of putting the people at the center is still relevant today. Thirdly, the thing of being very inspiring in your actions is still relevant today. And the thing of being respectful of people's wishes is still relevant today.
So the principles are still the same.
Principles are still the same. So there are certain things in our past that still carry on today. But they have to be modified to what the new normal is. And I think where you are right about certain cultural traits, whether it's lobola, whether it's polygamy, all of those things have some relevance in different cultures, but they are starting to evolve. So in my own family, the eldest person in our family, who's been the leader of our family, asked that I take over to lead the family. It's a daunting task. Because there is no org chart in the family. There are no rules in a family.
There's no meeting request.
There's no meeting request. You are now leading as if you're leading volunteers. But his idea was, I want you to take this family into the modern era. So working with the family, we've had to modify a number of things that are part of our culture to be relevant to the younger generation.
That's very wise of him, actually.
And so that's the way we have to think about leadership, that for this younger generation, the millennials, certain things that came from our past can still be relevant if we do them in a way that they can resonate with and move on with it. That's really the kind of thing that we have to do in thinking about taking our continent forward.
And almost like my wrapping up question is, capitalism, I think in the last 10 years has been under a microscope. And if you bring it to the context of South Africa, people always say that capitalism works on the premise that we all start from a
same starting line, right? And you are rewarded where you are at that particular moment. It doesn't take into account all the other things that have happened prior to you getting into this point. So it doesn't look at effort, it looks at where you are. And if you look at, for example, corporate South Africa, where there is transformation, where, never mind that this transformation, people argue that the way they look at transformation is not really applicable in the South African context. Yes, you can have gender and probably race diversity, but how a black child gets to come to a certain point and how a white child comes to a certain point is very different. So, and then there are people who go on and say there's conscious capitalism, and conscious capitalism actually looks at, for example, then how do you include the heart and the soul and of people in leading? Do you think capitalism is dead? Or do you think capitalism is like the previous point that we put on the table to say it needs to evolve? And is it evolving?
I think it is evolving, because I think sometimes we have these arguments about the terms. So let's just take the South African context, especially with a lot of the political noise that's there today. We as South Africans don't have enough savings today to fund all of the things we want.
Yes.
None. So if you don't have enough savings, what do? You borrow.
Yes.
You borrow from savers of other countries.
Yes.
This is what we call investors.
And they come with their voice.
All those people want to know, are we going to get our money back? Will we get it with interest? And is our money safe in that environment? If you can't treat those investors in a particular way, they will go and invest somewhere else.
Yes.
So we can get stuck with our labels. The simple thing is, unless we've got enough of our own savings to finance our infrastructure, social services, pensions, all of these things, we are not going to progress.
Yes.
Right? So let's put that piece on the side. But society itself has argued that rampant capitalism that doesn't care will not last.
Yes.
Today's millennials will not accept it. Society will not accept it.
Yes.
So both within places like the UK through Brexit,
Yes.
in the US through Transit,
Yes.
you're starting to hear people say the political and economic elites have not been listening to us.
Yes.
We will now speak with our voice and we shall be heard.
Yeah.
That this rampant capitalism in the way it is cannot continue.
Yes.
There must be a way in which more people benefit from society. Now you bring it to our situation in South Africa. Society that we have today is so unequal. Almost the most unequal in the world.
Yes.
That is not sustainable.
Yes.
It has to change. Where we all differ is the how. How do we do that? So talking as a corporate leader, there are a number of things that are clear to me. One, there is no way I can lead a team that's not diverse. All my teams must be diverse in the South African context.
Yes.
And the majority of them will be black, and they will be African, and there will be African women in particular.
Okay.
It's given.
Yeah.
Anybody who doesn't understand that is in denial. Secondly, my organization that I work for has to contribute to making South Africa a better society. It can't stand on the outside and say, I'm just going to make profit.
Yes.
Because the money we're trying to make will not be worth the paper it's written on if you have social unrest. Just like we've had in the Middle East with the Arab Spring.
Yes.
So South Africa is so unequal. So the organization I work for has to find a way of doing that. Thirdly, we have to produce young leaders who will come with innovative ways of solving South Africa's intractable problems. All these problems we have need a lot of innovation. How do we solve housing? How do you solve health issues? How do you solve... So if we don't put education in the center of what we do, we will not get the best brains solving these things for a profit.
Yes.
because that's what makes people to be motivated.
Yes.
So some young person comes with a model or something that helps, they make money, but we're able to grow as a society. Lastly, we are connected to the world. We can't see ourselves in isolation.
Yes.
So we must influence, but we must also be influenced. Great Kwame Nkrumah used to have this saying that says, we look neither east nor west. We look forward.
Okay.
We would say we don't face east, we don't face west, we face forward. So leadership is not a title held, it's an influence felt. What we require is many influencers so that we influence one another and influence the world to create a society where more people benefit than less, where we can protect our environment and succeed. Our African heritage gives us a lot as a platform to start with, but there will be other influences that make us better. So that's what we should be looking at.
So in closing, if somebody is watching this and is occupying a leadership position, whether it is within their organization, and wants to bring about change or probably effectiveness, what are the 3 things that you would put on the table and say you thoroughly believe these are done, then you would see some kind of results?
The first thing is to accept why are you in a leadership role? Why are you leading? If you're driven by material things, power, prestige, the perks, accept that you will bring no change.
Okay.
Because those things will force you to only do things for yourself and your benefit and your family's benefit. So, but if you are driven by a higher purpose, then you start. Right? The second thing is you cannot lead anybody if you can't lead yourself. As the Oracle of Delphi says, know thyself.
Yes.
If you know yourself, you will know what are those things that I have to work on to make me a better leader.
Yes.
Right? And thirdly, then, third one, which is obviously important, is how do I galvanize the people that are meant to lead towards this path so that we can make this change. And when people make that change, they look back and say, we've done it. If you've not produced anybody, if you've not developed anybody, if you've not grown anybody, don't call yourself a leader. You're not leading.
Yes.
You're taking a walk. You have a nice stroll.
Okay. Yeah.
There's nobody behind you.
Yes.
But if you, through your work and the things that you do, you're making people great because of your presence and make that last in your absence, then you're leading. You're doing something bigger than yourself and you're making such an important contribution to society. That's what I think all of us should do. Leadership is lonely.
It's a calling.
It's a calling. You do it for leadership's sake, not for yourself.
For your sake.
And it's how that journey evolves.
And not everyone is meant to be a leader. And
Absolutely.
it's okay.
It's okay.
Yeah.
And the joy you get when you lead is not how exalted you may be, not how much money you may make, not the position you may get, but it's come from something deep where you see people you've worked with thrive, where you see people grow. When you're giving somebody a letter of appointment, when you give somebody a letter of promotion, when you see an entrepreneur succeeding, when you see that joy, then you know you're leading. Because it's not about you.
I've had so many aha moments just listening to you. I'm definitely going to watch this clip like over and over again. But I'd like to say thank you, Lincoln. And you know, the whole purpose of this platform is to expose and to tell those stories about our great leaders. And people are doing a lot of transformational stuff for us as Africans in the various platforms. And you definitely are one of those. And I think also just for our viewers to just say that, you know, when you see a story like this, when you hear, you know, a different perspective of how we approach leadership, especially with this whole cloud above us as South Africans and generally as African as the dark continent that cannot lead itself, I think this will bring about, and I hope it does bring about hope in your life, that there are people who are actually thinking about these matters from a very different and a very informed perspective, and that we will get there as a continent. We just need to have faith in ourselves. So thank you very much, Lincoln. It was a really great interviewing you.
Thank you so much.
Okay,
Appreciate it.
I'm Dudu and I'm out.